All right. We are going to come back into session for our afternoon session. We have another 2 hours that we'll be together this afternoon before we adjourn. And before I go any further, let's have opening prayer for this session. And I understand Jonathan Kim will lead us in that opening prayer. Jonathan.
Okay, brother and sister, let us pray. My children, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the table of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Our faithful God, our servant God, thank you. We people of God, even we are weak and sinner, we come near to you, especially for this beautiful and thankful denomination, CRC&A. Father, even we are small, not big, but thank you. Many people, many diligent, many faithful workers in here and outsider around the world. They share your blessings, your gospel of goodness to other people who do not know. Father, at this moment, we again start another section for this synod. Father, bless this beautiful people. Give your wisdom and insight, especially our president and also all who working together. Bless this time. Give us joy and peace and thankful heart too, Father. Thank you, Lord. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, just a couple of quick housekeeping matters or matters for clarity. First, the matter that we were discussing just before our lunch break regarding Overture 11 that we just acted on. We did not accede to that overture, and then the question was raised, how or will Senate in 2022 in some way see that overture? And what we judged when we had a conversation about this is that indeed we will provide that overture in the agenda to Senate next year as background material. It won't be an overture because we acted on it and did not accede to it, but it will be provided as background material with a page number reference for people if they want to see what the COD did with it. And so this will be available for the delegates to see that letter as background information to the, along with the other overtures that we deferred. So that's what I'm ruling as chair will do with that, with the communication from Neil and the overture. Secondly, I just call your attention to the agenda. Very ambitiously, the agenda suggested that we might get all the way through advisory committee 1, 2, and 3 before our break. Now, I'm sometimes mathematically challenged, but if I did the math right, that means Senate is now 66.6 percentage points behind where we ought to be. 666. Not a good place for Senate ever to be. And so we need to make up time, my friends. And I trust we will do so. We are going to go to advisory committee number 2. And Brian, I think you're presenting on that. Again, you can find that committee report under the special meeting of the COD link. Advisory committee 2. Turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
Paul,
And
Yes.
Brian, I'm sorry, is Colin at the ready to do a State of the Church address?
I can be ready whenever the agenda lends itself to that. So
Let's do it right now, Colin. Thanks for calling me out on that, Dee. I
Thank
rushed right to the next committee and I missed that on my own agenda. So we have our Executive Director State of the Church address. This mirrors what Senate itself would give our Executive Director an opportunity to do. So Colin.
thank you, Paul. Well, I'm certainly pleased to spend the next few minutes with you, giving you my perspective on the state of the church. And I want to thank in advance Carol, who is going to be sharing her screen with you. And Carol, if you could just put that slide up, that would be great. Every year, the executive director of the CRCNA offers a short speech to synodical delegates about the state of the church. And this year is very, very different for a lot of reasons. First of all, I'm here as your executive director, but have never been to synod in this capacity. Secondly, we don't have synodical delegates because obviously synod was canceled for a second year in a row. And you as Council of Delegates members are here, and those listening on the live stream are here. And you also understand fully the climate and conditions that we really find ourselves in right now, and probably don't really need me to tell you a lot about the state of the church. But let me start today with just reminding us about who we are, reminding us of our vision. We're a diverse family of healthy congregations, assemblies, and ministries. We express the good news of God's kingdom with a view towards transforming lives and communities worldwide. This is who we are. This is our call from God. And we do this by committing to our 5 callings of global mission and servant leadership and gospel proclamation and worship and faith formation and discipleship and mercy and justice. And we're the church together. We are the church. You are the church. Each of you represents a region, a congregation, a community that's doing ministry as God's church wherever it is that you've been planted. You're sharing the gospel, you're fostering faith formation, you're offering vibrant worship and acts of mercy and justice, you're on a mission, and you are the church. I want to today just provide us with a summary of what I've seen from my vantage point, and what I see is both hopeful and promising, despite the fact that we're coming out of a very, very difficult season, a very, very difficult couple of years. Let me start by just acknowledging the difficulty that we've all experienced. These past 2 years have been filled with unexpected challenges. You know, I assumed this role on February 20th, 2020, and shortly thereafter, COVID-19 surprised many of us. That happened in March of 2020 and forced us to adapt. Our environment was really quite different at that time. I remember the COD had just decided that there was really no way that we could do our meetings online. And of course, COVID forced us to rethink all of that. And now we've all become experts at Zoom. Churches similarly had to adapt and change and do ministry in a very, very different way. At the same time, other events in the news brought a continuing recognition of the racial realities, racial issues in Canada, issues in the United States and beyond. And while this really wasn't new, it forced us to think about our painful history and the ongoing racial realities in both of our countries, and it made us talk about it. Within our church, several issues have similarly sparked conversation and sometimes even heated debate. These include the human sexuality report that's going to synod that we've already talked about in this meeting, restructuring in our denominational offices and senior leadership positions to better reflect Canadian and US governance needs, and tensions around differing perspectives on social justice and race relations. As individuals, ministries, and congregations navigated these challenges, we've also seen some subtending issues arising. We know that pastors have been going through a difficult time, struggling with the extra stress of these years. Mental health issues are increasing, and we've seen a rising number of relational issues as pastors and some congregations have sought to part ways. As congregations adapted to these new realities of being the church during a pandemic, some have lost their second service. We've seen attendance dwindle. We've had to discontinue programs and practices that have been in existence for a long time. And as I mentioned, societal fissures have also sparked some polarizing conversations in the public square. And these things have wormed their way into the church sphere as well, sparking debate and arguments and, unfortunately, even sometimes difficult and cruel treatment of each other. But I want to say that in spite of all of this, I still report that the state of the church is hopeful and promising. Why? Because I know that God is in full control of all things and he has amazing things in store for his church. It is his church. In the midst of this difficult reality, many elements of Christ's church really do shine through. And I believe these elements can be seen through the lens of our own ministry plan, our Journey 2025. Let me talk a little bit about that. Now, this denomination has responded to the current situation of our world by launching our 5-year ministry plan that we're calling our Journey 2025. This plan, as you know, was developed out of many listening sessions with leaders across North America, and I know many of you have participated in this. And what became abundantly clear at those times of listening was the fact that there's some common themes that we really know that God is calling us to. These 4 milestones for our journey: cultivating practices of prayer and spiritual disciplines, listening to the voices of every generation, growing in diversity and unity, and sharing the gospel as we live it missionally and plant new churches. I'm going to look at each one of these in turn very briefly. You know, we could not have foreseen how these 4 milestones would take on a heightened urgency in this past year. The combination of 15 months of COVID restrictions and difficult issues that threaten to divide the church has really put us on our knees together. As we truly seek to discern God's will and direction, we must deepen our engagement with this milestone, cultivating practices of prayer and spiritual disciplines. Now, while this is happening in a variety of ways and in lots of different places, I just want to highlight a few for you. For example, Faith Formation Ministries has launched an entire faith practices initiative highlighting different spiritual disciplines and offering some concrete ways of incorporating them into individual, family, and congregational life. It was mentioned earlier that we have a denominational prayer team led by John Hukama, who's arranged for ongoing denominational prayer that's open to everybody. And you can participate every month by sending a note to prayer@crcnapartners.org, and you're going to get information about prayer times and a Zoom link a few days before we do this. In addition, at my request, the Council of Delegates, and I thank all of you for doing this, recently endorsing a plan for a year of denominational prayer that'll culminate in the Synod of 2022. I think it's really critical for us to continue to be on our knees together. COVID has affected every generation differently, and this has provided us with a great opportunity to live into milestone 2, listening to the voices of every generation. As we've adapted to the pandemic, for example, we've recognized that the mental health toll it has taken is different for our children and young people. And this really requires our collective response. We've also learned that we need to incorporate intergenerational voices into everything that we do, into every one of our calling areas, as opposed to our generation-specific programming. You know, as we live into this milestone as well, we're grateful for a $1.3 million Lilly grant that gives church leaders a research-based action plan, not only to retain youth and adults, but also attract and fully integrate them into the life and leadership of the church. This program we call Generation Spark. It's being launched in partnership with the RCA to build authentic, safe, and non-threatening relationships across generations where there's opportunity to learn from each other. And this project has already started with 10 pilot churches, and we've got a goal of adding 20 more this fall. I'm excited about this project, Generation Spark, because like many other denominations, the average age of CRC members is increasing, and we have a significant challenge in reaching out to youth. Some statistics highlight this need, not just in the CRCNA, but across both of our nations. The percentage of individuals who are unaffiliated with any faith tradition is rising, and the unaffiliated rate is higher among the younger generations. This is both a problem and an opportunity. And we know that as Reformed Christians, we believe that God's Holy Spirit goes before us into these unchurched spaces, and we should obediently follow, bringing the gospel in each one of these areas as well. In addition to the fact that the unaffiliated sector is growing and it's more prevalent among the young, we're also seeing a phenomenon that we might expect. The faith community writ large is aging, and among Protestant Christians, it's aging pretty quickly. In this chart, the Protestant Christianity is at the lower end of the chart. So we're really just a part of an ongoing societal trend in our nations, where the younger population is large and increasing rapidly, and an increasing number are spiritually unaffiliated. Listening to the voices of every generation is not an option for us. This really is a gospel imperative. In a similar way as a denomination, we have a continuing need and a growing opportunity to reach out and embrace the significant diversity of races and cultures present all around us. The events of the past year have certainly refreshed the desire in many of us to address racial injustice and care pastorally for all minorities and all marginalized people that God has placed in our communities. These desires are really enmeshed in this milestone 3, with its longings for reconciliation. We want to embrace our existing diversity, grow even more diverse, but also celebrate the things that unite us as we live into Christ's command to be unified, as Christ prayed in John 17. You know, contrary to the world's values, we as Christians are called to exhibit a sense of unity that draws the world toward Christ. John 17:20 and 21 says, "My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and as I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me." I believe when we exhibit this unity that comes from Christ, that it's an attractive unity, that the world will believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And much like the population of the unaffiliated that's becoming younger, our environments and neighborhoods are becoming more and more diverse by race and ethnicity. Ethnic and racial groups have an increasing share of the populations. This is true in both Canada and the US. And these groups are skewed heavily younger. Again, this provides a challenge, but also an opportunity for us as Reformed Christians. And if I can share one more chart with you on the subject, I would note that when we look at religious affiliation by race and ethnicity for Black and Hispanic peoples, Protestant Christians have the highest percentage of their populations. Again, this is a mission opportunity for the CRC to articulate a holistic gospel across a wide range of races and cultures. Now, CRC has not been idle in this regard. The Canadian office is in the process of adding a new position, a senior leader for diversity and race relations, to help address this important issue. Similarly, we see the Office of Race Relations hosting living room conversations to have webinars and conversations on race and enable people to talk about these issues. The Office of Diversity has been intentionally reaching out to our existing minority groups. We need to continue these activities as well as do so much more to continue to reach out to new cultures and neighbors in all of our contexts. Now, when we combine these first 3 milestones and we look at it as a lens through which to see our neighborhoods, we recognize that there's tremendous hurt all around us crying out for gospel healing. And so our renewed commitment to milestone 4, to share and live the gospel missionally and plant new churches, is timely and appropriate. We're privileged to share the good news with our neighbors and have been learning new and effective ways of doing this. Resonate Global Mission has taken the lead in lots of this, so we thank them for their work. They recently held a global conference, global summit that had over 400 people register. The emphasis here was on equipping and encouraging people to share the gospel near and far in their own Jerusalem, their own Judea, their own Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Now, if you were unable to attend, I encourage you to check out the video recordings of sessions still available in Resonate's YouTube channel. You can access that through the CRCNA website. This milestone is a critical part of the gospel. It's God's command. And though we have an okay track record of planting new churches and worshiping communities, we really need to get better. That's why we've recommitted ourselves to church planting as a denominational imperative. So how are we doing overall? And how is your denominational staff engaging with individual churches? We know that many of our existing churches are declining. We can see this in our communities, and we can also see it in the statistics of worship attendees and members. Our stats bear out these truths. This is the landscape as of today. We currently have 1,024 churches across the US and Canada. We track significant engagements that our denominational ministries have with each of our local churches. We count a significant engagement as a personal connection with a local church. We don't include things like mass mailings and so forth. But again, we have almost 70% connection with each of the churches, and I certainly want to commend the staff and my colleagues for this work. We're going to continue to do even more as we come alongside local churches for the sake of the kingdom. It's also not commonly known just how diverse the CRC is. Of our more than 1,000 churches, more than 100 are Korean. Another 100 are all other minorities, including Hispanic, African American, Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander, etc. And another 100 are self-identified as multi-ethnic. So in total, if you were to look at all of these categories, you've got almost a third of our churches, 341 churches that are ethnic or multi-ethnic churches within our denomination. Now, many ethnic and diaspora churches are stressed, especially in the wake of COVID-19, but I believe they are persevering. Our engagement percentages with these churches is not as high as that for the general group of churches, but I believe we're improving here as well. Just so you know, we keep track of our regional engagement with churches, but also at the classis level. So we've got engagement with churches, engagement at the regional level, and engagement with classis. Some membership trends. Membership trends are a bit troubling, but they show some signs of promise. When we look at our older traditional churches, we see signs of decline. New expressions and newer churches are reaching new communities. Total number of churches over time, for example, over the last 15 years, there's been some decline in the recent years, down from a peak in 2014 of 1,103 churches. Over the past 15 years, though, it's been a bit up and down and relatively stable. We also have some help through our denominational agencies and ministries of churches considering change. In addition to many denominational ministries, we've got a new initiative that we call Vibrant Congregations, a third space occupied, shared by the RCA and the CRCNA, which helps churches figure out what's the best path forward for them and in their context of church renewal, tapping into resources in both denominations and beyond. So taken in the aggregate, total Sunday attendance lags membership. That can be a troubling sign. But to see what's really going on, we need to take a closer look. And for many years, our yearbook survey only tracked official membership. Recently, we've added average Sunday attendance to this as well. We've noted that these numbers can vary greatly. In some of our long-standing but declining churches, attendance is only a fraction of membership. We've got attendance lagging membership. But when we look at our growing churches, the number of attendees is significantly higher than members. And in fact, more recently planted churches tend to be higher growing than older churches. Additionally, more recently planted churches tend to be much more racially and culturally diverse. So this again amplifies the need to plant more churches, plant them among younger congregations, younger populations, plant them in more diverse populations. I think this is something for all of us in every region to get engaged in. And this is further seen when we look at our 341 ethnic and multicultural population of churches, that attendance really does outstrip membership. So that's a good sign of health and growth in that population. And as a further sign of growth, the new online campus that many of our congregations have been forced to have, we've discovered during the pandemic. This has provided us both with a challenge and an opportunity to reach new people, different people than we've ever reached before. So when we look at our ministry plan, we see these new opportunities being unfolded before us. We're called to prayer and spiritual disciplines. We're called to reach new generations, embrace new cultures, and engage and plant churches. And again, something that all of us need to be focused on as we go forward. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about finances. I know that you're encouraged, as I am, by the plans that we're looking at through our Journey 2025. Now, of course, we can only have these plans if they can really be funded. Part of that commitment to doing this work together comes with financially supporting all of the ministries that we have. And frankly, I'm grateful to report that God's people continue to be abundantly generous, even in this year of pandemic. When some churches felt the sting of economic recession and COVID and faced closing their doors and faced situations when pastors couldn't be paid, various churches with other means rallied together. We were able to raise more than $800,000 and provide grants to over 175 congregations to help sustain them and their ministry during COVID-19. To me, this was an example of the church being the church and communities coming together, the church community coming together to help those who were hurting during COVID-19. And in our shared ministry funding program, Ministry Shares, we also see continuing generosity there. This year, for the first time, we switched from a per member assessment model to a faith promise model for Ministry Shares. This actually felt quite a bit risky during a time of pandemic, but frankly, I'm pleased to report that the Ministry Share system, over 18.4 million was pledged for shared ministry. And some of these pledges, more than 100 of them, even came from small emerging churches that had never in the past been able to participate in the Ministry Share program when it was a per member, because obviously emerging churches don't have members. But we're so grateful that this new system allows all of us to join in ministry together to the glory of God. And while I'm talking about numbers, every year we provide an opportunity for churches to complete a survey describing their current status, their health, their participation with each of our areas of calling, and their engagement with the 4 milestones of our Journey 2025. Though the results continue to be encouraging. I would just say that every year we invite 20% of the churches to participate. And so over a 5-year period, we will have given everyone an opportunity to participate. Our churches are characterized, these are our top 5 desired futures based on that survey. Our churches are characterized by vibrant worship, engaged discipleship, good leadership, and a care for their community, which results in acts of mercy and benevolence. And here is a listing of our top 5 scores. Our churches urge us to apply the Bible to every area of our lives. Our churches encourage us to build relationships with one another. They're places shaped by grace. They nurture the faith of children in practical ways and engage children in the life of the church. These are all things that I think we can feel good about and continue to pray about, that God will allow us to continue to do more and more of these things. At the other end of the scale, even though these results are not terrible, I would say that they give us a listing of some areas that we can become better at. We can become better at building relationships with other Christians, according to the survey. We can become better at having our congregations be places where people of all generations find their spiritual home. And we talked about how important that is in terms of intergenerational engagement. We can become better at having our congregations be more encouraging to women to develop and use their leadership gifts. We can be better at having people in our congregations feel they're part of Christ's worldwide church. And of course, finally, having people in our congregations better respond to the call to do justice, love kindly, and work humbly with God. These are the results that the church, that you have said to us. And of course, as we continue to engage with each of the churches, we're going to make sure that we're partnering with you and enabling us to do that collectively. So where does that leave the CRCNA today as we move into a post-pandemic reality? I still hold tight to my belief that the state of our church is hopeful and promising. And here are a few more signs of hope. The task force we call SALT, and we all are familiar with that on the COD, standing for Structure and Leadership Task Force, produced a report now approved by the COD to adapt our structure and senior leadership of the denomination. And for many probably listening in, while this might seem administrative and far removed from our greater calling of sharing the gospel, I'm personally excited about what it means. I think the recommendations recommit us to unity as a denomination. Of course, we have differences regionally, nationally, or even congregation to congregation, but we have deep shared commitments to the Reformed faith and our calling as God's people. These recommendations unite us in those shared elements of our faith. Secondly, these recommendations recognize our diversity and our need for contextualizing our ministries in different ways. This includes allowing for greater direction and control of ministries within Canada by Canadians, but also for contextualizing ministry regionally and for our various ethnic churches, emerging churches, and church plants. And third, our new ministry plan, our Journey 2025, is quite exciting. I encourage all of us to live fully into it, recommitting ourselves to prayer and spiritual disciplines, remembering that every generation matters in the well-being of our churches, becoming hospitable congregations that emphasize that every ethnicity is precious, and renewing our commitment to sharing God's riches, spiritual and otherwise, with our neighbors nearby and globally, as we support vibrant new communities of faith. My belief that the state of the church is hopeful and positive is not blind. I recognize that we've got great challenges facing the church, and these are pretty immense, but we know that God is on the throne, not us. As we emerge from this time of COVID, I think about new beginnings. And we have an opportunity for new beginnings now as a unified denomination, as a unified church, with great opportunities facing us in each one of our neighborhoods. I had a new beginning of my own yesterday. I became a grandparent for the first time. And I'm not there with them in Philadelphia, but I've been spending lots of time over the last several hours just looking at pictures of her little baby in the arms of her mother and father. And I realized that here we are emerging out of COVID-19 with a new opportunity. We've gotten blessed anew by God. He's opened our eyes to new possibilities of what can be done in each of our neighborhoods. And my prayer is that we will grasp those opportunities with both arms and fully embrace them. In 2 Chronicles 20:12, there's this story about Jehoshaphat, who was faced by a great army, and he calls the Israelites to prayer, and he prays, "We do not have the power to face this great army that is against us, but God, our eyes are fixed on you." And that's our prayer today. We do not know exactly how we are going to face all of the challenges that are before us, but our eyes are fixed on you. May God continue to bless the Christian Reformed Church in North America.
Thank you very much, Colin. If we were all together in person, I'm pretty sure there'd be some applause and certainly some expressions of thanks to you for your work and for presenting us with those statistics and numbers and sort of giving us an overview, for giving us the reality of where we are, but and some of the challenges, but also the hopeful expectation that in God's power and by his grace, we will continue to thrive and improve as a denomination. So thank you very much for your wonderful work. For someone who's never been to Synod before in this capacity, you did pretty well. So maybe you'd want to stick around a couple more years or so. Oh wait, you've already done that, haven't you?
I am intentionally being silent, Paul.
All right. That's all right. Well, thank you, Colin, for the State of the Church address again. We appreciate it very much. And now we will go to Committee 2, which I had just introduced, having missed Colin for a moment. Let's go to Committee number 2, Advisory Committee number 2. You'll find their report in our agenda material, and I'll turn it over to Brian Oxner, and we'll work our way through.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that a lot. I'd like to make just a few introductory comments if I could, and then we'll jump into the reports as you see it. The first, Paul, if I could ask that you as chair recognize Dr. Amanda Bankhuizen and grant her the privilege of the floor at any given time. And I guess I ask that in particular that she doesn't need to respond to somebody's question, but if she would like to input at any point that she be granted the floor, if that would be agreeable.
Yep, by all means. And Amanda, just get our attention, call out if you want to jump in at any point.
Great. Thank you, Paul. I'd also note on behalf of the committee, we're the Congregational Ministries Committee. So we usually deal with faith formation and worship ministries. And I would just have you note that everything put in front of us today was abnormal for our committee to wrestle with and to tackle. And I say that just as background so that maybe so a little grace will abound, but also that I will try to do my best to navigate our way through this at the present time. So it will be noted, and I think some of our committee feels that same way. Some of what we will be doing is ratifying COD work, which seems like a really interesting thing to do. So I trust that most of us will have that kind of background with us as we make our way through this report. So again, and then I guess one other comment that I would make, it came to my attention this morning that this document that is set before you, we have just a few kind of church order issues as we drafted it. So I'm going to do my best, Mr. Chairman, to make sure that I get this in the proper procedure when it comes to presenting this material to you. So I beg the forgiveness of the committee on that regard, but trust that we can navigate this well. To that end, Mr. Chairman, I would draw the COD's attention to our recommendations, and that would be, we'll start with number 1, that the COD on behalf of Synod attend to the following with regard to addressing the abuse of power in response to the decisions of Synod 2019. And then A, that the COD on behalf of Synod adopt the proposed Code of Conduct report in Appendix F and instruct the COD to devise a plan for implementation for the denomination, classes, and churches per the instruction of Synod 2019. And then also letter B, that the COD on behalf of Synod take note of the COD's progress report on the implementation of the decisions of Synod 2019 regarding abuse of power. So part of what we had to wrestle with in our committee is that we're dealing with stuff from Synod 2019 to Synod 2020, and then supplemental reports to Synod 2021. And so that's part of what we're wrestling with here. So Paul, I'll leave it at your discretion if you want to split that. But again, all of this is work that the COD has already done. It's already been approved on the COD. and we are adopting it and then forwarding it out into the churches. So that is moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's take A and B together. I think we can do that. And to Brian's point, I think part of the reason the program committee and we as a COD agreed to take this on is Synod 2019 already seems like a very long time ago in many ways. And to just keep deferring seems foolish. We've done a lot of work on the COD. So Brian's already acknowledged the sort of awkwardness of approving our own work, but we don't want to keep delaying good work that's being done here. So recommendation number 1, A and B, is for us as a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion or questions on the motion? The speaker queue is open, and you can use that if you wish to speak to this motion. And again, for our those of you who are participating live, as our chairperson Brian was pointing out, this is material that we on the COD are already very familiar with because we've acted on it in the past. I see no one in the speaker queue. Are we ready to vote on recommendation 1, A and B? All right, I judge that we are. All in favor, I'd like to ask you to raise your hand. All in favor, raise your hand and keep it up for just a couple of moments here. All right, thank you. You may put your hands down. And are there any opposed? And I'm just toggling through my speakers here. All right, that motion carries. Thank you, Brian. You can go on.
Thank you, Paul. The next piece is where the church order piece kind of caught up with me just a little bit. So I want to draw your attention to recommendation 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is where I'm going to try to not wordsmith this, but make sure that I get it right. So I was informed that the COD in lieu of synod can have 3 responses to an overture: to accede, to not accede, or to say something completely different and make that our response. So if you notice, what we've done is we did not accede and then added something and then told you this was our response. So we have a few things out of order, and I'm going to try to correct that, and hopefully the body will stick with me. So what I would like to move is recommendation number 3, that the COD instruct the executive director to make recommendations for improving the appeal process in light of church order, and that this becomes our response to Overture 9. The grounds of which to move recommendation 3 would include the grounds of number 2, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then also the ground under number 3.
Okay.
Now, I hope I've made that clear as mud for everybody, but I'm trying to separate out what we needed to do there.
Okay, so basically you're taking recommendation 2 off the table and moving recommendation 3 with the grounds of number 2 and its initial ground. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the motion before us is that the COD instruct the executive director to make recommendations for improving the appeal process in light of church order. And that is our response to Overture 9 with the grounds from number 2 and 3.
So that is what's before you, and then permit me just a little bit of background as to how we got there.
Sure, please.
The overture, as it is stated, Overture 9, the simple overture is that this particular individual, Overture Synod, to instruct the Council of Delegates to appoint a committee composed of clergy, social workers, mental health care professionals, and clinicians to address the following 7 areas to help pave a way for better body life in the Christian Reformed Church. And then there is a subsequent list of 7 areas to which this overture addresses. And if you take a look at the grounds that are put before there, it was the committee's understanding that the majority of the work that was being asked in those 7 areas is already being done by the work of the Abuse of Power Ad Hoc Committee. And we didn't feel it appropriate or necessary to add another committee to do that work, which is already set in place and is already being acted upon in many ways by Safe Church. That did leave us with one gap in that conversation, which is why the recommendation is what it is. And the gap is in the conversation we had. I should note that we did invite the author of this overture to come and join our committee, and we granted her the floor for a brief word of comment, but then also was open to questions from the body. So we were able to dialogue with the author of the report. And in the midst of that conversation, it came to our attention, and that's one of the things that we would like to address with the recommendation, is that it appears inside of the appealing process that it is still heavily weighted towards kind of collegial affection, if you will. Collegial protection, maybe even be a word that we could use. So when someone experiencing abuse comes and goes through the process, that process is then set before other pastors, other elders, and other deacons, instead of maybe a non-biased committee. And the church order is set up that way, that those allegations of abuse are always brought towards to fellow office bearers. And so the recommendation in recommendation 3 is to make some of those, to instruct the executive director to make recommendations for improving this appeal process because of the nature of how that church order puts that appeal right back into the hands of fellow office bearers. So hopefully I've kind of given the summary background of that, and it's clear where we're headed. So
Okay. If I can ask a quick follow-up question for understanding, Brian, are you assuming that the executive director will make recommendations to the COD or to Senate 2022, or did you talk about that? It just says that the executive director will make recommendation. Who will he make recommendations to? Did you talk about that?
if we did, I'm drawing a blank on that, but I'm not remembering. I would ask Heather Cowie if she remembers, or
I believe we did think that would come back to the COD.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that. So Brian has introduced us to it and tried to explain it to us a little bit. It is recommendation 3 with the additional language that this will be the response to overture 9, with the ground that you see there, but also grounds A through G from recommendation 2. That is the motion that is in front of us with the grounds. Let's have people speak to the motion, pro or con, or questions regarding it, and you can put your name in the speaker queue if you would like to speak to it. Jonathan, Kim, did you want to speak to it? Please go ahead.
Okay, I want to know who is the right person to answer this one. Like, for example, code of conduct, some that kind of things, as we know, these are very, great, things. You should know all the church members, yeah. So we passed that to the church, but still, as we know, many minority church, I believe, even Korean American church, we do not interacted engagement with those great guidelines and things. Okay, we decide, we pass because of lack understanding, lack communication, lack participation. So I understand for Korean American CRC congregation pastors, we have some channels, to know that in our own language, but not all of them. I don't know about, for example, our Hispanic brothers and sisters congregations. Do you have, or in our denomination levels, do you translate, not all of them, but at least, good sort of our guidelines, our decisions to integrate our each congregation and members? That's my question or comment.
Do we have someone who can answer the question for Jonathan about translating the material into Korean or Spanish or other languages?
Paul, if I may,
Please, Colin.
perhaps we can give Dee an opportunity to just spend a minute on that. We do have a translations committee, and we have individuals from various ethnic groups come in and help us to prioritize which documents need to be translated. So we don't translate everything, but I think we try to make sure that we're serving well there. Dee, anything to add on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our translations team has been working, we have a minimal budget, but we've been working to translate a lot of the creeds, confessions, and other documents as requested by some of our language groups. There is a website on our CRCNA website, or web page, I should say, and Kristen maybe can throw the direct link into our chat here. But that is a list of some of the items that are already translated. And this team meets once a month and continues its work and engages with the various ethnic groups, Consejo Latino, the East Meets West group, our Korean leaders, and receives from them, like Colin mentioned, a prioritized list of what is needed. The synodical services has been translating the synodical reports. For instance, the human sexuality report right now is being translated, but the other ministries as well are encouraged to translate materials that they produce. So like I mentioned, there is a prioritized list that we work from, and with the budgets that we have available to us, we try to make these materials available. Kristen just posted www.crcna.org/languages is the website where you can see all the materials that have been translated to date.
All right, thank you for the information in response to the question. Did you have a follow-up, Jonathan?
Yes, one more, please. I don't know who is the right person, among us or somebody. Like, for example, Korean American congregation, we have some, website, crckoreanchurch.org. So like Dee said, we just try to translate and pass, our decisions, for good, but not enough, but enough, especially current things. But how about our brother, sister, for example, Hispanic congregation? Do they have anything? Do you know?
I think Dee has and Colin have said that yes, they do, but that's all still in process. Not everything is translated. And if you go to this website that Kristen is providing us, it shows what's been translated into what languages at this point. Thank you for the question. All right, the recommendation is in front of us. Kathy, did you want to address it? Kathy Smith?
Yes, I have two questions actually about this recommendation. The first one is the way in which it's been combined. And I understand the reason for that, Brian, but now what we have is a series of grounds listed under a recommendation that they don't really fit with, because the recommendation 2 was saying that the COD has already addressed the issues listed. and then it gives those grounds A through G. So it seems to be that has to be part of the recommendation, because A through G don't really bear on a recommendation about the appeal process. I can pause. My other question is about the recommendation 3, but Paul, what would you like me to do?
I don't know if Brian has a response to that question.
I have thoughts. I don't know if I have a response. So I think I'm trying to do that a little bit on the fly in light of the recent understanding that I've been given. So I guess I'll just offer that one more time, that our committee had a wonderful conversation recognizing the work that has already been done with the majority of the overture. Where we ended up feeling like it came short was the way in which those trying to get their case heard felt as if it was continually put back into a system that would hold down or not receive as adequately as it could the appeal or the allegation of abuse. So I'm happy to rewordsmith that to get greater clarity. But in trying to respond to Overture 9, which asks for another committee, it's our advisory committee's hope that we affirm the work that's already been done, but recognize the gap that is still there in the conversation we had. So, Kathy, if you would offer friendly amendments or a friendly suggestion, I think our committee would be very open to that. Just trying to figure out the best way to state that.
I wonder if I could take a stab, Brian. I wonder if we could just more or less say what you just said. And if you look at recommendation 3, if we simply said the COD affirm the work that has already been done and instruct the executive director to make recommendations for improving the appeal process in light of church order. And then the grounds would fit.
Go ahead, Kathy. I think that to me that's very friendly according to the conversation, but Kathy, feel free to shape that up a little bit better.
Well, I was waiting for you. It's not, I'm an advisor, so it's not for me to make judgments on amendments. I think that solves the issue that I had raised. But then if I may, I had a second question I wanted to raise. May I do that, Paul?
Sure, please go ahead.
Thank you. So my second question is about recommendation number 3, to instruct the executive director to make recommendations for improving the appeal process in light of church order. And then the ground state, historically, those who've been abused have not felt like they've had adequate opportunity to share their stories. And I guess that we as the COD then desires to ensure that all parties have an equal voice. I need to express concern about that recommendation and ground. It could be that the appeal process needs improvement. It certainly could be reviewed to see if it needs improvement. I have been on the appeals committee at Synod for the last number of years and have watched these processes go through. And it's not apparent to me at all that all the parties have not had an equal voice. I understand this is an overture from one individual, was not adopted by her council or by her classis, but it's to be respected as legally before Synod and before the COD here. But I do think I have to bring it to your attention that it is not necessarily so that the appeal process prevents the parties, the appellants and the respondents from having equal voices. The processes that I have been part of in synodical appeals, all parties have had an equal voice. So I just need to bring that to your attention, that I'm not sure the COD wants to document that statement. And if the concern is great enough, then perhaps the process should be reviewed to see if anything could be improved. But to make a prejudgment that there are problems to be improved, I think I would want to see some evidence of that in this supporting this recommendation. Or I would suggest the COD might want to see more evidence for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. I see that I do have two speakers in the queue, but I want to be clear on what our motion is going to be, because we're going all over the place at the moment. So let's be clear on what the motion is. Kathy's first part of her comments was about the lack of clarity of the motion regarding the grounds. I suggested an alternative given that, and Brian seemed to agree with it. I want to make sure we're clear on what our motion is first, and then we'll go back to discussing. All right. My suggestion to Brian was that the motion would now read that the COD affirm the work that has already been done and instruct the executive director to make recommendations for approving the appeal process in light of church order. And this would be our response to the overture. Then with the grounds under number 2 and 3.
Correct. That's very friendly, Paul, to what our committee affirms. And if I could just ask, I hate to put her on the spot, but Dr. Amanda Benkhuizen was an advisor to our advisory committee. And I guess I would ask her to speak to the very thing that Kathy just addressed, that there wasn't historical, or however Kathy put it so well. I guess it was our understanding as a committee that outside of the particular instance that and the case that is acknowledged in the overture or presented by a person in the overture, that there were other extenuating matters that were presented to us that made that somewhat more germane. And so if I could, Paul, invite Dr. Benkhuizen to share just a few reflections in response to that.
Please, Amanda.
Yeah, I think what this overture is saying is it's giving the executive director an opportunity to look at the appeal process and examine whether there might be gaps in it. And in light of the overture that was brought to this committee, where the author of the overture was saying, I think there's a problem. So what what the recommendation is doing is inviting the executive director to take a deeper look and say, is there a problem? Do we need to improve this or not? And, from the standpoint of my office, I mean, it's just anecdotal, but I have heard stories of people who haven't felt like their voices have been heard, or they just haven't felt like that their testimony has been taken seriously enough. And so don't feel like the appeal process was just and fair. And so in light of that, this recommendation invites us to sort of examine it again and say, is it just and fair? Are we allowing for those people who are making decisions about the lives of people who are bringing forward concerns? Are we allowing them to have the information that they need to make just and fair and compassionate decisions? Right. So.
Thank you for that, Amanda. I'm going to go to our speaker list. I have Elsa, Sherry, and then Ralph.
Having served on the Abuse of Power Committee and chairing the ad hoc committee, one of the things that we put in place is letter F, the Dignity and Respect Team, and it has not had its final approval yet, and so has not been able to be used by anyone. And our response, our idea in adding that was because of the stories that we heard, and we understood that the parties bringing the allegation did not feel that they had an opportunity to be heard and to someone to listen who wasn't already biased. And so we put that in there to help with that. So I don't know if, because it hasn't been approved, it hasn't had any traction. So I don't know if the committee looked at that as a possibility for answering this overture.
Thank you, Elsa. Brian?
Yeah, I think all of those were pieces included in our conversation, whether implicitly or explicitly. I think our hope behind that was that our church order is consistent with all of the other pieces that we're trying to accomplish. So we absolutely are mindful of dignity and respect, team. I think the heart behind what we're asking for is that our church order reflects the very things we're trying to do.
Thank you, Brian. Sherry, and then Ralph.
I just listening to Elsa, she said most everything I wanted to address, but it bothers me just a little bit, Brian, on what you just said, that the ad hoc committee addressing abuse of power spent hours and hours and hours on this exact topic. And I guess to ask the executive director to again look at that, it's been looked at, and a suggestion made about the position of dignity and respect. So it seems to be adding more work to something that's already been done. But if you're sure that that was all reviewed within your proposal, it just seems like double effort redoing something that has a lot of time has been spent on.
Thank you, Sherry.
Paul, I can certainly affirm that we did not have near the extensive conversation in our advisory committee that the ad hoc committee for the abuse of power has. I would be completely ignorant of saying that we would have any length of conversation to that end. So again, we're wading into waters where I have not had the depth of conversation on the COD end of things with the abuse of power documents. So I greatly appreciate the comments that are being made. And I'd ask Amanda if she had any other comments that she'd like to share there as well.
Yeah, I think part of it is we're in a bit of a time warp, right? We are dealing with overtures that are coming from 2020 and a report that was brought before the Council of Delegates in lieu of Synod for 2021. And so there is a bit of this crisscrossing and we're trying to all get at the same thing. I think that's probably the best way of saying it. We're trying to get at how do we make our church and our denomination a safer place and a healthier place for those who have experienced abuse. How can we be a church that is vigilant about being just and compassionate towards those who have experienced abuse? And so I think this recommendation, my understanding of the dignity team was that it was something a little different. So this recommendation was to address particularly the appeal process. The dignity team has another mandate, I think, that I didn't understand to particularly address this. So if it does, then perhaps we don't need this, but then I think it would be helpful to hear more about what the dignity team was intended to do, which is further down in this report. So.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
I have Ralph on the list, and then we're going to be voting on the motion that's in front of us. Ralph.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling with what exactly we're being asked to approve here based on comments that I've heard, because we have, on the one hand, the recommendation is that the executive director be instructed to make recommendations for improving. And Kathy says that need for improving is not necessarily in evidence. But then we have Amanda saying that what we're really looking for is that the executive director be invited to examine whether or not the appeal process needs to be improved. So I'm not sure if this recommendation, this motion that we're being asked to approve, is what we're really asking for. I'm confused as to what the end game is on this recommendation based on comments that others have made. Sorry.
Well, all I can do is point us to what the recommendation says, right? And the recommendation as currently worded is that the COD affirm the work that has already been done and instruct the executive director to make recommendations for improving the appeal process in light of church order. And this is our answer to the overture. In essence, I think what we would be saying is that, yes, we do think there's room for improvement, and we want our executive director to look at that. It could be that our executive director does the work and says, hey, it turns out we're doing things quite well, and my recommendation would be that we stay the course and keep doing what we're doing and take note of this or that. Or the executive director could come back to us and say, well, I think the advisory committee was correct. There are some areas that we could change things, and here's what they would be. I mean, that's my own interpretation of the language of the recommendation that's in front of us. Let's vote on this recommendation. It is in front of us. I had just read again what the recommendation is with the grounds there from number 2 and 3. Please vote yes or no. Please vote yes or no. All right, that motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for the conversation, and we look forward to your work, Colin, and your recommendations that will be coming to us in the future.
I do as well.
All right. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you. I draw your attention then to number 4. And this is in regards to Overture 10. Overture 10, the general overture is that the Synod instruct the executive director to commission a book, print or online, that contains all of the adopted Synod and CRC documents pertaining to abuse and the Office of Safe Church Ministries to put it into one resource. And the motion is that we do not accede to Overture 10 on the grounds that all of the information requested in this overture is currently available, although not in a single book format, and is found there in some of those searchable databases. So it's somewhat accessible already, and that's the motion.
All right. The motion is that the COD on behalf of Senate not accede to Overture 10 with the stated ground there. Any discussion on this motion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I would judge that we're ready to vote. And I would like to vote by simply a show of hands on this. This is number 4, that the COD on behalf of Senate not accede to Overture 10. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Give me just a sec here. All right, put your hands down. And now, are there any opposed? If so, put your hand up. And that passes. Thank you, Brian.
Then I would move on to number 6, Mr. Chairman. And it looks like a lot of resources in our report, but if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, I would move all of number 6. And I move all of number 6 basically because this is getting into the hands of the congregations. The Abuse of Power Ad Hoc Committee report, with all that the COD has been working on up until this point. So everything that you see in there is a lot, all the work that the COD has been doing already in regards to that report. So updating handbooks and all of that. So I would move all of number 6, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so Brian is suggesting that we take number 6, which begins on page 2 and carries over all through number 3 or page number 3 and page 4 and the top of page 5, and it brings us to the next number 6 on your report, right? So we're just taking the first number 6 this time, right? But everything that's in there, and he's moving all of it together because this is material the COD has had opportunity to look at previously. We'll see if that's acceptable to the group. That's moved and on the floor, number 6. Any questions? Yeah, Brian skipped number 5. Just a note here. I noticed that as well, but I was just going to let it slide because just as we saw in committee number 1, number 5 really isn't necessary because we already declared what our response to those overtures was. So we're on number 6 now. The full motion is in front of us. Any questions? All right, I judge that we're ready to vote. All in favor, please show me your hand. All in favor, show of hands. All right, you may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
And then the second number 6, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I did not catch that as I reviewed minutes. So,
that's all right.
And again, this is just additional information. Again, as we're receiving additional and supplemental reports on that work that's already being done. So, again, all of this has been provided to the COD, and we are simply taking note of those additional updates. So I move number 6 as well, Mr. Chairman.
All right. The second number 6 is in front of us as a motion. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor, let me see your hands. Thank you. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you. You see, Brian, we're all grown up and in an important meeting, and we still get to talk about a second number 6. So it's all good.
Appreciate your grace. So number 7 then. If I could just to note the official overture is to overture Synod to instruct the Council of Delegates to appoint a licensing board composed of clergy, social workers, marriage and family therapists, psychologists, mental health professionals, and clinicians to ensure better trained and equipped leadership in the Christian Reformed Church. And then there's several points underneath that, but that's the general scope of the overture. And we move to not accede to Overture 14 on the grounds of the scope of the overture is too large to take on, but desire that the spirit of the overture be considered by the COD. And in part of what that means, Mr. Chairman, is there was some fruitful conversation in the midst of our advisory committee that recognized while we're not set up to tackle that at the present time, and we recognize other denominations are doing that, and just feel it's helpful to keep that in the front of our minds. Letter B, no cost estimates were received, and it would be noted that it would be very difficult to determine the costs. Letter C, administration of a or multiple according to locations licensing boards are prohibitive. We talked about the challenges that it would face in particular regions within Canada as well as the United States. And then from our vantage point, it was unclear about what we're actually asked to license, and how to maintain that. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, number 7 is in front of us and on the floor. Any questions, concerns, issues, any discussion on number 7? All right, seeing none, I judge we're ready to vote. All in favor, please show me your hands. All right.
Well, you had said you'd pick something.
Thank you.
But you might
You
wanna
can put your hands down.
speak and stuff. You,
The host muted me there for a moment. I asked if there were any opposed for you to please show your hands.
I'll take the blame for that one, Paul.
That's all right. You wouldn't be the first person who muted me, I promise. So, all right, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to note my abstention to that vote, please. Michael
So-
Tenhaken, Lake Superior.
So noted. And I'll just mention to the body that there's a couple others on other matters, not just this matter, but other matters who abstain from the vote, and you can communicate that so that we're aware of that. Appreciate that, Michael. All right, back to you, Brian.
Thank you. Number 8. The motion is that the COD on behalf of Synod not accede to Overture 15. Overture 15 in its nutshell is that Synod approve that competent mental health professionals can be utilized for advocacy services. Excuse me just a second. I want to make sure I got the right one there. Correct. That Synod approve the competent mental health professionals can be utilized for advocacy services and abuse education and prevention training, even if they have not been formally trained by Safe Church Ministries. And we would move to not accede to that overture. By nature of a conversation that we had with Amanda, we didn't feel as if it's necessarily the work of the Safe Church Ministry to vet programs and resources that churches can access or use. The local councils, letter B, local councils and those bodies have the authority to bring in their choice of training for those particular events. So we would move not to accede to Overture 15.
All right, that motion is in front of us. Any conversation, discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion? Let me see your hands. And thank you. You may put them down. Are there any opposed? Please let me see your hands. All right, that motion carries. Back to you, Brian.
You bet. And then number 9, Mr. Chairman, the motion is that the COD on behalf of Synod not accede to Overture 16. Overture 16 simply states that Synod to declare that persons who serve in classical, synodical, and council delegate positions who have pending allegations of abuse, including abuse of power allegations, should be suspended from their positions of leadership until the church order process is resolved and the ministry of reconciliation is completed. And as you can see, the grounds by which we would not accede to that, the code of conduct is being implemented, and we believe that will address the concerns about persons who are being accused of abuse of power. So we believe that that's already being acted upon by some of the things that we've already passed.
All right, thank you. So number 9 is in front of us as a motion. Any questions or comments before we vote? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor, please let me see your hand. And thank you. You may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
Thank you, Paul. Then I guess I would just ask the grace of the body that we would strike number 10 as well because of the redundancy of that, that note there.
Yep. So
and then number 11, that the COD on behalf of Synod take note of the updates of initiatives with regards to the prevention of abuse of power. And that's just a supplementary report that we have received that came to Synod 2021.
all right. And that motion is that we simply take note, number 11. Any questions or comments on that? All right, all in favor? Let me see your hands. Thank you. You put them down. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries as well. And that brings you to the end of your committee work, correct, Brian?
I hope so. Thank you all for your grace. And yeah, that was a place where I feared to tread, but thank you for your grace. So.
Thank you very much for your work, Brian, and for the work of the committee. Thank you, Amanda, for all that you do with Safe Church as well. And I realize that especially those last numbers we moved through fairly quickly. But the whole issue of abuse of power and caring for those who have been hurt by the church or feel that they have been hurt by the church is, of course, a most important action. And it is unfortunate that it was Synod 2019 that really moved the ball forward on this. And shortly thereafter, COVID entered, and it's been kind of difficult to get all this process. So I appreciate the work of the COD and the work of the committee, and let us continue to be attentive to these matters. So, you know, you can do whatever you'd like, but we're going to take just a 1-minute break. I just think we've been through some heavy matters. Take a stretch, grab a quick glass of water, and then we're going to move to Committee 3. If you have to use the bathroom, try to do so quickly. I do want to see if we can get some of the work of Committee 3 done. That will set us up well for our remainder of our time tomorrow. So let's take a very, very quick break, as quick as we can, and we'll come back and go to Advisory Committee number 3.
You ever notice, Paul, that when you mention a 1-minute break or a 5-minute break, how quickly the videos go off and everybody's gone, just like boom,
boom. Yeah, no one needs much invitation to that, do they?
No, not at all.
There's a big vacuum.
Well, John Lee's going to bring Advisory Committee 3, and I don't know if you're there, John, but since only half of us are here, if you have anything you want to sneak through quickly, now would be the time.
You have to make sure it's 50% plus 1, Paul.
Oh, yeah, there's always someone who will catch that, isn't there, William? Well, as we're waiting to come back together, and I know you folks are listening on live stream, if we go back to Tyler's pool analogy, my mom had a tendency to say things to us like, well, you kids have 2 minutes to get over here, or you have 1 minute to do this or that. And we kids knew full well that mom couldn't really tell time all that well, and we could stretch that endlessly. But if dad said, dad tended to give us timelines in seconds, and those seconds were very slow. You had to respond quickly. So I've noticed too in meetings, when you say a minute, it usually means 3. And when you say a 15-minute break, it means 25. But we will do our best to get about another half hours of work in this afternoon before we adjourn. So welcome back, everyone. I continue to see a few blank screens, but we're going to try to get back at it. It looks like most of us are back in the saddle, so to speak. So we're turning to advisory committee number 3. And I think we actually have a 3A and a 3B on the reports. I'll turn it over to you, John, and you can lead us through this.
Thanks, Paul. We do have report 3A and 3B. There are 2 motions on 3A and 17 on 3B. I would like to also indulge your permission so that Kathy Smith can speak to anything as we go through our report.
Certainly.
So I'll draw everyone's attention to the motion on 3A. This is about the convening church for Synod 2022. And really it's just simply saying that the church that was going to host Synod 2020 will now host Synod 2022. So I'll read the observation. An opportunity to host Synod outside of Michigan. First of our observation was simply that we also lost the Synod of this year, which was to be in an even better location in Iowa. And so we just wanted to note that loss. So observation that an opportunity to host Synod outside of Michigan in the near future is desired. The cancellation of Synod 2021 to be held in Iowa resulted in missing this important rotation to other areas outside or in our denomination. So we're just making that observation. But a recommendation C on 3A is that the COD on behalf of Synod accept the invitation of Encounter CRC in Kentwood, Michigan to serve as the convening church of Synod 2022, scheduled to be held in Grand Rapids, Michigan on the campus of Calvin University. And the ground is that Encounter CRC was appointed as and had prepared to serve as the convening church of Synod 2020. However, Synod 2020 was canceled due to COVID-19 pandemic. Again, so moved.
All right, that is moved, and that recommendation for Encounter to be the convening church of Synod 2022 is on the floor. Any questions or conversations regarding this recommendation? Seeing and hearing none, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of having Encounter be the convening church, let me see your hands. All right, thank you. Let me put your hands down. Are there any opposed? If so, please raise your hand. All right, that motion carries.
All right, we move to our second recommendation on 3A, which deals with a process of an appeal that we had worked through in this body in October. The observation is just naming what Andy DeRuyter has said earlier and Brian Oshner has said earlier, that the COD committee experienced discomfort approving work previously approved by the COD, but understood the reason for having to do so. In other words, in Andy's words, we're on both sides of the table and we're uncomfortable with that. But we recognize the need. So with that before us, the recommendation is that the COD, on behalf of Synod, approve the work of the COD with regard to the personal appeal submitted to Synod 2020 by 2 individuals regarding the Queens CRC Jamaica New York congregation regarding a decision of Classis Hudson. And so that is the, again, our motion. And I'll just remind the body in making that motion, we're not relitigating the appeal, nor was the decision we made in October appealed or challenged by either party. We're simply, as now on behalf of Synod, affirming the work of the COD in October. So moved.
All right, that motion is in front of us. Discussion or questions on the motion?
Paul, just a quick point of order.
Yeah.
I recognize there's a negative vote that's registered there. Is that I can't quite remember how we did it with William's report, but is this a place where they would table that and then allow that negative vote to speak?
If you want, Mr. Chair, I certainly would invite Tyler to speak, but it was his concern was the one we just named, Brian, about the process of having a body affirm its own work seems to lack integrity, and that this could maybe just wait until Synod 2022, that we would just simply table our work and have that Synod take it up. So that was it was not in the substance, it was on the process.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't remember how many other registered negative votes, if any, we have coming up, but the point of registering the negative vote wasn't that automatically you will state your case, but it gives you the right to do so. Since we're not having any minority reports, it gives you the right to do so if you'd like. And Laura took advantage of that, obviously, earlier and stated her case and why and so forth. And anyone who records a negative vote is certainly free to do that, as Tyler is on this if he would so wish. All right, that motion is in front of us, and I still have no one in the speaker queue, so I would judge we're ready to vote on the recommendation. All in favor? Let me see your hands. And are there, you may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? Raise your hands. All right, that motion carries.
All right, Mr. Chair, then I would direct everyone's attention to report 3B. Again, there are 17 motions. Each of these are what we would call a complex motion. There are a variety of different cases involved in each motion. I would remind the body if there are any particular cases that someone wants removed from the motion, you can always speak to split the question. I'll also, just by way of observation briefly, I remember when I did clinical rotations for my emergency medical technician training, walking into a room where there was a nice black and white image of a tumor, and the technician was quite excited about how clear of an image it was. And even though clinically that's the correct diagnosis, there was a lot of human elements. That was someone's grandma or mom or sister, right? We're going to be moving through a lot of really clinical decisions of synodical advisors, and we're going to affirm their work. But I just want to remind the body behind these decisions are great celebrations of retirement and new candidacy, but also great pain of separations of ministries and ministers. And so we want to recognize those elements even as we move through, hopefully in good order today. So the report has just been given page numbers this morning. So if you printed it out yesterday, it won't have page numbers. So I invite everyone to go to page 2. And this is going to be a series of recommendations dealing with retirements. I'm going to move those as one. So we're on page 2 of 3B, and that is that recommending that the COD on behalf of Synod take note of the above list of ministerial and commissioned pastor retirements. 2, that the COD on behalf of Synod instruct the executive director to send a letter of appreciation to each of the retirees listed above. And 3, that the COD on behalf of Synod offer a prayer of gratitude for these servants of God and for the many years of service they represent. So moved.
All right, we'll take those 3 together. You can see the names listed above, and as John reminded us so well, whenever we're doing work on synodical deputies, we move through a whole lot of items of joy and sorrow relatively quickly, making sure it's all done in good order, and yet we certainly celebrate and grieve as appropriate as we move through these items. Any questions on these first 3 recommendations? Hearing and seeing none, all of you who are in favor, let me see your hands. All right, thank you. You may put them down. Anyone who is opposed, let me see your hand. All right, that motion is approved. And do you have someone in mind to lead us in the prayer?
I did not have anyone in mind, but I was going to wonder if you want to do that now, Mr. Chair, or if we wanted to maybe close this time in prayer, including retirees, but some of the other elements for moving through.
I think waiting sounds like a fine idea, and we can sort of include them. Yeah.
And then if it, with just by way of letting him know, I'd like to invite my vice chair, Sam Cooper, to offer that prayer at the conclusion of our report.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Willing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if Sam is willing, we'll plan on that. What I'll plan on then is we'll move to page 4, and there are 2 recommendations on page 4 of, again, 3B. The first is the recommendation, these all will sound the same. The recommendation that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies. And this first one is after number 11, and it deals with Church Order Article 8, which is ministers received from other denominations. There are 11 names there. Again, we're approving the work of synodical deputies with regard to classes in processing Article 8. So moved.
All right, that motion is in front of us, and you can see the 11 that are all listed there, and I trust you've had a chance to read it. Any questions or comments, discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, you may put them down. Are there any opposed? Let me see your hand. All right, that is approved.
All right, on that same page, the next recommendation is the same wording, that the COD on behalf of Senate approve the work of synodical deputies, this time with regard to Church Order Article 8C3, which is the release after a specific term of service. And there is one item there from our classes. So moved.
All right, that is in front of us. Any questions? Seeing and hearing none, I judge we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, you may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? Raise your hand. All right, that recommendation carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then we move to page 7. And again, the recommendation has identical wording. Recommendation that the COD on behalf of Senate approve the work of synodical deputies. In this case, this is Church Order Article 10, which is classis examination of candidates. There are 24 such examinations, and we're approving the work of the deputies, accepting those exams. So moved.
All right, you can see the 24, and I trust you've had a chance to read through those. And once again, we're approving the work of the synodical deputies. Any questions? All right, seeing and hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand. All right, thank you. You may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? All right, thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I direct everyone to page 9. Towards the bottom of the page, again, a recommendation that the COD on behalf of Senate approve the work of the synodical deputies. In this case, with regard to Church Order Article 12C, which is ministers and specialized services. So these are ministers of the word who are in a non-parish setting, but we're saying that is in accordance with minister of the word. So moved.
All right, that recommendation and the 15 associated with it are in front of us. Any questions, comments? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, any opposed? Raise your hand. Thank you very much. That carries.
Then I would direct everyone's attention to page 11. There are 2 recommendations there. We'll begin with the one at the top, same wording. The COD on behalf of Senate approve the work of synodical deputies, in this case with regard to Church Order Article 13C, which is loaning a minister to another denomination. And apparently whenever you loan a CRC minister, there's good interest, at least in their sermons. So moved.
All right. So moved with comment by John. Any questions or additional comments? All right. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. You may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? All right. That motion carries.
Thank you. Still on page 11, I'm moving down the page, another recommendation that the COD on behalf of Senate approve the work of synodical deputies. This case with regard to Church Order Article 13C, which is an extension on those loans for those who had previously been so loaned. Again, so moved.
All right. Any questions, comments? All right. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. You may put your hands down. Are there any opposed? Please raise your hand. All right, that is approved.
All right, next I direct everyone's attention to page 14. And there is, again, these are complex recommendations. It's the COD on behalf of Senate approve the work of synodical deputies. In this case, with regard to Church Order Article 14B and C. B is when we release a minister to a ministry outside the CRC. So someone, for example, was an ordained minister in the CRC and goes to become Anglican. And then C is to non-ministerial vocation. That is, for example, someone who was a minister of the word who becomes an accountant, right? And so we're releasing ministers to either other outside ministry or to non-ministry. And those names are before you, and so moved.
All right. And you're moving, this is on page 14, right, John?
Page 14, yeah.
You're moving that along with the recommendation on page 13, or did I get confused?
I didn't see on 13, I believe there are 11 names that are under 14B, and then there are another 6 names under 14C, but I didn't see in our report that we had a separate motion. If I missed it.
Okay.
So I was just taking those.
You're
two
taking them
groups
all
at once.
together.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
If someone wants to split the question, they can. Yeah.
All right, we're taking those two together. No questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
Then I would direct everyone's attention to page 17. And this is dealing with Article 17, 17A. This is when a church and a pastor either mutually or by one party agree to separate, and that's approved by classis and then synodical deputies. And so the recommendation is that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies for these 23 cases of pastors and churches having a separation. So moved.
All right, that motion is in front of us. You've had chance to review the names and the cases listed there. Any questions? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
Again, if any of you have been around the CRC, as I look at that list of names, there are churches and pastors known to me. And again, we know the pain often reflected in each of the things we've just approved. I would like us to move then to page 19. This is our 10th motion right now, and that is recommendation that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies. This is with regard to Church Order Article 17C, which is an extension of eligibility for call. When someone is separated from a call in Article 17, they can have an extension of eligibility, and that's what we're doing for these 12 individuals.
All right. Any questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. And are there any, thank you, and are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
Also on page 19, we have a recommendation that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies with regard to Church Order Article 17D, which is released from the Office of Minister of the Word. There is one situation there that the deputies dealt with, and we're again approving their work. So moved.
All right. Any questions? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Are there any opposed? Raise your hand. All right, that carries.
I'd like to direct everyone's attention to page 25, where we have 2 more recommendations. The first is the recommendation the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies with regard to Church Order Article 23A. And this is about the approval of positions for commissioned pastor. So the classis will approve a position, and then our next motion is when we approve people who fill positions. Again, so moved.
All right, that motion is in front of us. Any questions, conversation? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Are there any opposed? Please raise your hand. Thank you. That is approved.
Right, on that same page, recommendation that the COD on behalf of Synod take note of the above named persons. This is actually a different motion wording than the previous ones have been. Ordained as commissioned pastors within the classes indicated. Again, this is Church Order Article 23A. You approve the position, and then the classes can fill that position with a commissioned pastor. And we're approving the list of names under M. So moved.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Yes, Andy?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought church order was the synodical deputies only approved the position. It was up to the classes to approve the person as the classically ordained position. Are we approving these people or just recognizing that they are commissioned pastors now?
Yeah, we're simply taking note, Andy. You're correct. But if Kathy would like to speak to that, but yeah, we're taking note of the above named persons as ordained.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, that the positions were previously approved by Synod, so now it's just being made known which persons were filling those positions.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Andy, John, and Kathy. Any other questions? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. And are there any opposed? All right, that carries.
Thank you. We have 4 more motions. I'll direct everyone to page 26, where the next 2 recommendations are. On page 26, first recommendation under, I guess that's in, is that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies, in this case with regard to Church Order Article 24A, which is a commissioned pastor called as a solo pastor. And again, we're approving the work of the deputies in those situations. So moved.
All right. Any questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. You may put them down. Anyone opposed, please raise your hand. All right, that recommendation carries.
Next recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is also on page 26, and that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies, in this case with regard to Church Article 24B, which is the calling of a commissioned pastor to a specific term. And again, there are 2 cases there. So moved.
All right, that motion is in front of us. Any questions? All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. Are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
Last 2 motions are on page 27. And the first is the recommendation that the COD on behalf of Synod take note. So again, to Andy's question, we're simply taking note that these commissioned pastors have concluded service in the classes indicated. That's Church Order Article 24D. And so these are not necessarily retirements, but there's a conclusion of a service. So moved.
All right, that is in front of us. Any questions? All those in favor, let me see your hands. Thank you. And are there any opposed? Let me see your hands. All right, and that motion carries.
All right, our 17th and final motion on report 3B, which is Q, is the recommendation that the COD on behalf of Synod approve the work of synodical deputies, in this case, regarding Church Order Article 82 and 83, which is the deposition of minister of the word. Tyler had alluded to the weightiness of this action earlier in our meetings, but again, we're concurring with the work of the synodical deputies. So moved.
All right, that motion is in front of us, and I have one speaker in the queue on this motion. Tyler.
I just wanted to point out, Mr. Chairman, again, and John actually just alluded to it, that here as a COD, we are engaging in action of special discipline. Really, and as all of these motions on behalf of Synod, we keep saying this on behalf of Synod. I know it just kind of ties into our discussion earlier from Committee 1, where there was debate whether we even have the right to do that. And in many ways, I think we've just been doing that through this entire committee, and now here especially removing a minister from office in conjunction with these synodical deputies. On some level, I wonder, then, should we have the right to do that? I would imagine it's going to pass overwhelmingly without any objection, like pretty much all these other things. I just want to note the irony of that mostly, Mr. Chairman.
All right, duly noted, Tyler. Any further questions or discussion? All right, all in favor? Let me see your hands. Thank you. And are there any opposed? All right, that motion carries as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That does conclude our report. Again, mindful of time, I've tried to move through it efficiently, but I just hope we can recognize, and we'll have Sam now in prayer recognize before God the wonder and the brokenness of what we've just witnessed. So Sam, if you'd be willing to pray.
Thank you.
Yes, please join me. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we have celebrated your faithfulness already today. We now add our thanksgiving for your faithfulness to us through ministers and commissioned pastors and their families. We ask that you would establish the work of their hands and hearts and voices. We're grateful for their service to local churches, to neighborhoods, to those inside and beyond the congregation, for all the seeds graciously and abundantly sown. We depend on your generous watering and the sunshine of your grace, that their work may continue to bear fruit among us. For overseeing work of our synodical deputies and their service, we're grateful. For the careful, diligent work of classes and committees that this report represents, we also thank you. May your love surround and heal and restore and reconcile the heartache and the pain that is also represented in this report in the lives of individuals and congregations named here. For those in this report who are taking up their callings in new ways and in new places, we ask your blessing. And in all of this, God, we thank you that you continue to be faithful to us, both when we are in states of grace and disgrace. We entrust ourselves and the church again to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sam. All right. Just a couple of notes before we close for the afternoon. We still have Advisory Committee 4 and 5 in front of us, and we will take those up when we reconvene in the morning. We're 4 minutes from the time we're supposed to adjourn, so it doesn't seem to me to make any sense to try to quick squeeze something in. We simply don't have the time, but we will start again in the morning. And what I think we're going to do, if this will work for you, Gary, is we'll take Advisory Committee 5 first in the morning, because we want to make sure that we have their work done before we receive the candidates. So we'll do 5 first, and then we'll come to 4. And if we can finish all of 4 before we receive the candidates at 1:30 Eastern time in the afternoon, so be it. And if we can't, we'll have to continue our work afterwards. So just be mindful of that on schedule. I want to thank everyone very much for their time and their attention to the matter. All of you, the whole raising hands worked pretty good for everyone, except there's always one who can't quite. Brian Oxner insisted on giving me a thumbs up each time instead of a raised hand. So way to go, Brian. Thanks we really did deal with some heavy matters, and Melissa's going to close us in prayer in just a moment. Sam's already prayed for some of those items, but the abuse of power matters likewise, something that we need to pay so much attention to in the denomination. Not to mention the 2 matters that we did earlier today, the whole structural revision, which we dealt with fairly quickly, but also the coming human sexuality report, Neeland Avenue's actions, the COD operating in lieu of Synod. We really are in a unique time with some heavy issues on our plate, and it's good that we can spend time together as the church, even in an official setting like this, doing our best to discern the will of the Lord and act on it. So I thank you all for your thoughtful participation. We will be back together again in the morning, Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And again, we'll start our work with Advisory Committee number 5. And I have Melissa Van Dyke on our schedule to offer our closing prayer before we adjourn for the day.
Yes. Let's pray together. Almighty and awesome God, we give you thanks for this day and this opportunity that we've had to gather and to ponder together, Lord, what it means to be a church and how we love one another well, how we care for one another, God, how we come alongside each other and continue to pursue your way in our lives and in our community. And Lord, there's definitely been a lot of heaviness to this afternoon. God, this session that we just had, and just recognizing, Lord, that we trust in you. God, we continue to put ourselves into your hands, God, asking that you lead us and guide us. God, that the work we do may bring glory to your name. God, we think of, the State of the Church address that we heard from Colin. Lord, we think of just the different experiences of our congregations over this past year, Lord, and some have been trying and some have found ways to thrive and grow, Lord. And we just pray that as we hold these collective experiences, God, looking ahead to the future, we may continue to have hope in your way, in your direction, God, that we might, with humility, come before your throne and ask you, Lord, to show us the way. God, and with the abuse of power conversations and knowing the lives that have been impacted by abuse within the church, God, by people who have proclaimed to be followers of Jesus, who have been in positions where they have spoken, Lord, on your behalf, led people in your way, God, and yet have committed such atrocities, Lord. We pray for forgiveness. We continue to lament, God, the harms that have caused, and just ask, Lord, that where we need correction, God, we engage in that work, Lord, that we don't try to hide anything, but we bring it all into your light, God, asking that you will heal us, that you will make all things right, God. We long for your reconciliation, your shalom in this place. God, have mercy. Lord, let us not be a place where these abuses can dwell, God, but continue to move us toward your vision for goodness, God. The created goodness that you put into place. And Lord, as we recognize even the work of the synodical deputies and all the ministries that are underway, but also the changes that have happened as people have discerned new calls or have left congregations, God, have been removed from places. Lord, we know that our lives are continually shifting, and we pray, God, that you will hold those who are in places that are heavy right now. And as we finish our work for today, God, we pray that we may go forward into this day in the knowledge that you go before us, God, that you are with us and you are hemming us in. Lord, may we know your presence, your peace, your grace, your love, and may we be people who are conduits of these things to others. In your holy name, amen.
Amen. And I note that we begin in the morning with devotions that focus on global missions calling. Zach King and Kurt Sellis are going to lead us in that. And to facilitate that, I was just reminded that the very first recommendation of Advisory Committee 4 is that we schedule time for those presentations. And without objection, I'm simply going to so rule that we will in fact allow that time so we can open with those devotions in the morning. All right, we stand adjourned until tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern.